Housing and treatment, those were the demands of homeless advocates this morning on City Hall Plaza. Today was the first anniversary of the abrupt closing of facilities on Long Island. Since that time, the city has restored the supply of shelter beds, but advocates say the homeless need other kinds of help.
We're supposed to have a responsibility to help these individuals to get better. Without these services, we have this type of stuff on the street, overdoses, robberies, crime goes up. Well, we replace that with recovery services. It can help out a lot. It will save the city and state millions of dollars if we help these people.
To this day, they have not reopened the largest detox facility in Boston. Has been closed. And what that means is that in the last year, 4,000 addicts seeking recovery were turned away from detox, were turned away because that program remains shut down.
We need to make a concerted effort in the Metroplex to provide low-income housing for the working poor, some of whom have to live in shelters because there's no place they can afford to live.
We must do everything we can to help people get back on their feet, to provide the treatment services that they need, to make sure they have the economic support so that they can protect their families until they're able to do more on their own.
And joining us are two members of the Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee, Lenny Higginbottom and Cleve. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
I want to start with Cleve, because talk about what's been going on in your life since what happened with the closing of the Long Island Bridge.
Oh, kind of briefly, after the closing of the bridge, I was in the South End Fitness Center for a couple of months. Then Jim Stewart, who is a member of the Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee, invited me to his shelter at First Church in Cambridge. So I stayed there from Christmas Eve until April 26th of this year, at which time I moved out to Fitchburg, Massachusetts. Rents are a lot less expensive out there, and I could afford to live without having to wait for a subsidy. So that's where I am now.
So now you have a home. Well, talk about how that is a difference.
Oh, Lord. It's almost undescribable. To have my own space, have my own closet, my own clothes all together, a nice comfortable bed to sleep in, door to close, place to go during the day. All of those things are things that you don't have when you're homeless. If you're not feeling well, you can go home, take a nap. Can't do that when you're homeless.
Lenny, what about your life right now? What's going on?
Well, spending a lot of time doing a lot of activism work at City Hall, State Capital on housing and opiates. It's keeping me busy, focused. And since I've been 20 years homeless, it's a lot to fight for. I see what condition this issue is at now. It's a lot worse than it was 10 years ago. Instead of 20 years ago, it was a lot better. 5 years ago, it was a lot better. It just all went downhill. And I'm just trying to stand up there to give a light to others that don't give up. Don't give up on, keep the hope on and keep struggling to go forward. And things will happen if you give up now and lay down and give up. It's a sad thing. But being homeless, it's when you're being mentally, verbally abused by staff workers constantly, instead of them uplifting you up, that's another thing that makes you give up. And like this gentleman said, when you get home, you can go home and it's quiet. You don't feel good, you can go home and rest. So it's tough being homeless, but you gotta have some will of not giving up in the fight and you to keep going at this hard time. This is a time when you get tested to make you stronger. This is not something to break you. It should make you stronger. Take all these bad things and flip it the other way and use it as a positive to get out of this.
Right. Cleve, the city has probably caught up on the shelter supply because there's a new facility in Southampton Street, but there's more that needs to be done, of course, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The shelters are already full to overflowing. We haven't even hit wintertime yet. We've been working with the city on establishing some training for their staff so that they can be a little more respectful in how they deal with the shelter guests, especially those who are struggling with trauma and the stresses that go along with that.
Lenny, what about the needs for substance abuse? Because some of that lost treatment capacity has not been replaced yet.
It's unacceptable to this point to lose over 1,000 people that over the opiate crisis, and over 3,000 people since the Long Island been shut down and the recovery programs are still, 3,000 people didn't have access to it. That is unexcusable. The new shelter that is in place now, city tried their best and they incorporated sober programs inside that building at the same time. Another thing that's not, how can you keep sober if you got everybody downstairs doing things that you're trying to stay away from? I give them all the effort in the world that the city did. They did a trial at a trying time, and they put things together, try to, sometimes, with the best intentions they have, but sometimes the best intentions mess things up if you don't think about doing it wisely. Haste makes waste, and we're losing a lot of lives over this hastiness decisions.
Right. Cleve, it looks as if it's hard to make a totally great choice here, because you don't want to dump everybody in one place. You don't necessarily want to put them all out on one island in the harbor. And then when you try to find a place in the neighborhoods, not all the neighbors like it. What do you do?
As far as detox and
Especially
recovery?
for treatment, yes.
We've been advocating for the past year for reopening Long Island for detox and recovery, not for sheltering, but for detox and recovery, because people don't want to have detox facilities in their neighborhood. You can kind of understand why they wouldn't. The island is already there. It's a residential treatment program, so people wouldn't be going back and forth every day. You can utilize ferries, and the City of Boston Police Department has a ferry ambulance boat. They could take care of emergency situations should they exist. There was a gentleman in town, I can't remember his name, I'm terrible with names, that runs a camp for boys on Long Island. He ran that camp this summer. He transported 450 kids back and forth every day. They had water, they had electricity, they had health care in case there was some sort of an emergency. And yet we can't do that for the people of the Metroplex who need detox and recovery.
Well, that was the summer. The wintertime could be a bit rough if you're going to ferry people. What about that?
The city can take care of that. That's not that big a deal, breaking up the ice so the ferries can go back and forth. If you... There's plenty of money to address that situation. There's just a matter of will. It's not a matter of know-how. It's just a matter of will.
Lenny, talk about the populations here, because first, you're a reminder that you can be homeless and still be working too.
Oh, yes, you can. I mean, homelessness is not by choice. It's misfortune. You could be one bad investment away becoming homeless. You could be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be a politician. Homelessness just don't pick one individual to be homeless. It's a lot of different combinations. And at this point in time, in the city of Boston that we're in, just recently a stat just came out that the population grew 13%. And then last year, and in a year's time, another stat was out, it grew 200 people. Now, I already know personally myself, since I am homeless and I spend a lot of time with the homeless population, I noticed the growth 2 or 3 years back, and now it's growing way faster than I ever seen it. So, and the winter is coming. The city needs to prepare now, look into the future right now, be visionaries and say, this winter is coming. Summer is over. We need to prepare now, contingency plans, so we don't lose no more people on the streets, and get prepared now.
This also means more permanent housing and I guess some vouchers. So how would that work?
Oh, there's lots of ways it can work. One of the things that we like to talk about is the Washington, D.C. Method. The city in D.C. funded out of their budget 3,400 units of low-income housing. The problem in Boston, obviously, is that there's not a lot of housing stock, and it seems like what there is pretty pricey. But if the city could move forward on providing shelter for homeless people, they'd actually save money. It costs a lot of money to put people in shelters. It costs a lot of money to keep families in hotels. And just like the opioid crisis, it would be better putting people in treatment than having them go into the emergency room time after time after time after time. So putting people in housing is extremely important. Get them stabilized, get them safe, and help them deal with their problems while they're there.
And people, of course, want to keep posted. You've got the Facebook page?
Yes, we do. Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee on Facebook.
Thank you both very much, Cleve Ray and Larry Higginbottom.